on Bloomberg Quint.
We have with us Mr. Kotak and Mr. Nilekani joining us on Bloomberg Quint. Mr. Kotak, let me start with you. Earlier today, you were talking about private sector banks becoming toe-to-toe in terms of market share with the public sector lending system. In terms of opportunity, it sounds great, but what about the challenges? Because the public sector banking system grew, and probably that was one of the major reasons why it had such a big NPA problem with them.
I think let's go to why public sector banking came into existence nearly 50 years ago. It came into existence because at that stage, private banks were lending only to big business, and the broader society, small and medium enterprises, and others were not getting money from banks. Fast forward 50 years later, bulk of the losses of both public and private sector banks are around lending to big business. So the public interest aspect somewhere seems to have got lost. And we have to ask the tough question, the accountability of how public interest needs to be evaluated. And it's a very important question because huge amount of national monies are there. However, I think we also got to understand that a system which has continued for nearly 50 years cannot change overnight. And therefore, there has to be a steady transition of how we move from system A to a different system in the future. But in that context, what we are also seeing is a fundamental change in the future of finance. Finance is moving digital. Finance is moving biometric based, Aadhaar based. Finance is moving into a world where effectively you're democratizing the availability of money based on scores and data. So in this fast changing world, I would rather look at the future than the past in terms of determining how our future journey in the financial sector should be, which is why we have launched this new alphabet ABCD as the basis of the future of finance.
Sure, and when I buy that point, sir, my question was about the problems that come with rapid expansion. Now, you're talking about 5 years. That's a pretty short time when you're talking about the banking system. Do you see those problems continuing in the next 5 years? Do you see that the problems of underwriting or the problems of government approvals not coming in time? Do you think those problems will continue?
I think fundamentally, banks should lend money based on very, very, very high confidence of getting it back. If you don't have that, don't lend. Okay? Because this is a business about other people's money with high leverage. It is not money to be squandered because finally, in any system, public or private, the cost goes to the taxpayer and the nation. And we cannot have a system where the country has been taken for a ride the way it has over the last 8 or 10 years. India is now amongst the countries with the highest stress assets, along with Italy and Greece. That's not a happy company to be.
Sure. Let me turn to you, Mr. Nilekani. And this question has to do partly with banking, but also in general with the Aadhaar ecosystem that you've been so closely involved with. We're talking about eKYC and how that probably is going to help banks, get more data on customers, help them.
To give customers a convenient way to open accounts.
Sure, but banks also need the data so that they can grow their own businesses. I'm just trying to understand from you, Aadhaar, by virtue of its structure and the way and the spread it has become sort of a de facto eKYC tool. Do you think that's a fair place to be? Because it's possible that a customer may not be okay with sharing his data with the bank and the cell phone provider that he has. Do you think that's a fair place to be?
No, I think the fact of the matter is that to get a bank account today or to get a mobile connection today, you have to do some KYC. In other words, you have to provide some kind of an ID. And that ID records are kept by the bank or by the telecom company. So if I have a choice between giving a Xerox of my driver's license or passport, where I don't know what will happen with it, to an electronic KYC with Aadhaar, I would much rather do an electronic KYC with Aadhaar. So I think it's not about, you can certainly give choice. But the reality is that eKYC is far superior, far more secure, far more convenient, and far more privacy guarding than using paper-based solutions.
What would you say then for instances, and these are things that have been reported multiple times, on people being denied certain rights because they do not have an Aadhaar number on their name?
No, I think the law is very clear that nobody should be denied a service because of a lack of Aadhaar. And I think we have to balance that out. But I think Aadhaar as an ID system is far superior to any other ID system, which is why it is so popular.
Sure. Mr. Kotak, to you, over the last month and a half, 2 months, we have seen a lot of chatter around governance in not just public sector banks, but overall in the banking and non-banking system. What would you say are probably the major issues that are plaguing the system at this point in time in terms of governance? Is it that we as a country probably lack any governance standard that we can be proud of?
I think the key issue in a banking business where you're leveraged to the extent you are, the core to governance is managing your risks. And the risks, of course, are credit risks, but there are risks around operational risks. And what you've seen in the last few weeks happen is a major issue, especially around operational risks. And therefore, I think we are now at a cusp where the financial system has to significantly up its ante on the quality of its risk management. And combine that with the changes which are happening in the world around us. Risks are going to be different, but they're not coming down. And how alert and agile is a banking system which is based on the foundation of trust to manage and protect people's monies.
Mr. Kotak, there's also this point you mentioned earlier about SME and the stress associated with that part of the business world that not having shown itself fully. How bad do you think it's going to be?
No, I think we have to watch how it plays out. But remember one thing, there is a significant amount of SME which was dependent on the tax arbitrage which was available pre-GST. Now that has stopped. So with that, some of the SME business models have come under pressure. And that transition is underway. So when that transition is underway, some of the soft underbelly will show itself in due course.
Right. This last question, and that's pointed to both of you. First, I'll start with Mr. Kotak and then Mr. Nair, you can join in. You mentioned a problem with you not finding sleep because of the privacy and data security issues. Now, we've seen typically whenever you have a tool that has a lot of data, just take Facebook, for example, it has been used or misused, you can say, for profiling and then therefore targeting certain agendas. What are your concerns, firstly, and what can we do to improve this?
See, I am in the banking business. Therefore, the one single most responsibility we have is to protect our customers' money. And therefore, it is my job to keep awake to protect their money. And it's something which we constantly worry about and have a sense of paranoia. And it's better we are that way. That itself does not protect us, but at least hopefully we are a little more alert to take care of our people's money.
Sure.
No, I think every system, whether it's the healthcare system or the financial system, has to take great pains to preserve the privacy and security of the data of the customer that it services. Aadhaar itself doesn't really create any data. Aadhaar is just an ID system. So when, for example, 811 uses Aadhaar to open a bank account, those details are in the bank, not in the Aadhaar system. So by design, Aadhaar is just an ID system that others can use. So it's relatively, there's no data collection happening there. So there's less risk of any data because there's no data on anybody else.
But what about the country's move towards having a better privacy law?
Well, I think that's a great move. I think Justice Sri Krishna committee is now working on drafting that law, and Justice Sri Krishna is one of India's most eminent jurists. So I'm confident that we'll get an excellent law from his committee.